Let's take a look at your market news now. Asian stocks advanced to a 6-week high this morning on hopes of a thawing in the US-China trade relations and expectations that the European Central Bank would kick off another wave of monetary easing by global central banks. Chinese stocks rose and the yuan hit a 3-week high after US President Donald Trump agreed to delay an additional increase in tariffs on Chinese goods by 2 weeks at the request of China's vice premier as a gesture of goodwill. Trump's delay of additional tariffs on Chinese goods comes one day after China said it would exempt 16 types of US products from import tariffs. The world's two largest economies have been locked in a protracted battle over Beijing's trade practices that have raised the spectre of a global recession. Wall Street was led higher by tariff-sensitive technology and industrial stocks last night. This comes after China extended an olive branch ahead of next month's trade negotiations with the United States. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.84% to 27,136 points, while the S&P 500 gained 0.75% to just above 3,000 points. The Nasdaq Composite Index added over 1% to close at 8,169 points. Now, before we go to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing has made an unsolicited $39 billion takeover offer for the London Stock Exchange. The move comes at a time of political turmoil, both in Hong Kong and London, aimed at creating a global trading power better able to compete with US rivals such as ICE and CME. The approach comes as Britain is set to leave the European Union. It's a step some politicians fear would weaken its status as a major financial centre. The Hong Kong Exchange already has a base in London as owner of the London Metal Exchange. It said it had played a key role in underpinning the City of London's position as a preeminent global centre for metals trading. Right, let's go to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange where my colleague Arabile Gumede is standing by. A very good afternoon to you, Arabile. What's happening on the markets today?
A very good afternoon to you, Arabile. What's happening on the markets?
Yeah, good afternoon, Zega. So not many people would have even thought that two exchanges could actually look to combine or one take over the other. And this is an audacious bid at best, and certainly a surprise as well. Then the London Stock Exchange certainly saying that they're surprised that a bid like this would have even come forth. Of course, they have been trying to buy a company called Refinitiv, which was previously owned by Reuters, which is a data analytics company as well. Then it does seem, however, that the London Stock Exchange has said that they would go ahead with that deal, even though that they're still expecting a whole host of conditions when it comes to the takeover from the Hong Kong exchanges as well. Then, so we'll see really how this fares, where it goes to, and clearly it's an audacious move then by the Hong Kong market there as they try to increase their capital pool as well. Just a quick note as well that of the 13 executives that are on the board of the Hong Kong exchange there, we do have 8 of them being pronounced then just by the government, with the CEO and the chair then being directed or being put in place then by the chairman of Hong Kong. That's Carrie Lam as well then. So certainly interesting when it comes to that fixture. How things fare will be of keen interest. We also have the ECB out today, who are set to put out their decision when it comes to interest rates and stimulus. Plus also those trade talks seem to be headed in a much better position. We'll unpack all of that in just a bit, but here are the markets for you, and we'll get into the detail right after this. We have a lot to discuss. Let's unpack all of it now. Viv Governor from Ransworth joining us right here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Viv, thank you so much for the time. Let's start off with that big story then. The London Stock Exchange, a takeover being sought then by the Hong Kong officials then as well, there as the Hong Kong exchange tried to take over. How audacious and how crazy a move is this? Is this even legal?
Oh, it is legal. It's audacious, but it is not something I think that is, without some merits. Okay, someone put there's an exchange that's basically in a troubled area with a lot of political uncertainty and a big contest with its big political neighbor, and the other one is Hong Kong.
Sounds exactly the same. Yeah.
Yeah, basically right. So yeah, look, Hong Kong has issues at the moment. Of course, with the I do think there are fears about the pushback or the backlash they're going to get from Beijing because of these Hong Kong riots, which have gone on for months now. Okay, Hong Kong has actually become a smaller part of the total China story than it used to be in the 1990s when they got into the whole business. When they got control over Hong Kong. Hong Kong was by far the most powerful financial center in China. Now it's coming down a little bit. Economically, it's not as big as its nearest neighbor in China. So we are seeing a situation in which there is possibly a benefit for the Hong Kong exchange to have this international link as well. The London Stock Exchange, of course, is being downgraded because of a number of things. A lot of stuff is moving to Frankfurt. A lot of stuff is moving to other areas in Europe, because of the issues around Brexit. Yeah. So maybe there is a case to be made here. But of course, when it comes to these key infrastructure and these key kind of areas of economic activity, we do tend to find that countries are much less positive about having a Chinese buyer than opposed to, for instance, say a European or American buyer of those assets, basically.
Yeah. But is it going to change the way the world thinks when it comes to market movement? London has been an epicenter, particularly in our time zone anyway, right? But really across the globe, it really is a big player when it comes to market. Does this shift anything if this was to be successful? You are creating the third largest exchange behind the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ here.
Yeah, basically London's size is a factor of its history rather than the factor of basically what it is right now in the world. What has happened is historically London has been the place where a lot of stuff has moved through. At one point in time, over 100 years ago, the pound was the de facto currency of the world. Even though the US at the time was larger, it took 2 world wars to effectively change that substantially. So we do find the US is now the number one country in the world, the number one currency in the world, the number one exchange in the world. London is basically the factor of the UK or the British Empire has that historic size imbalance. But if you compare it to Europe, there's no reason London should be bigger than, for instance, Frankfurt or Paris. You know what I mean?
Sure.
These are also huge countries, and quite frankly, it may be a rebalancing that has to occur over time. Also, London to some extent benefits from its old empire. A lot of South African companies, because of our old linkages to London, list in London, Australia, etc. You even have a lot of Indian, exposure to London as well because of the old British Empire.
Yeah. Okay, well, certainly will be interesting. We'll keep a sharp eye on this one, really. I think it's quite an interesting one to put forward. If we bring things to a global sphere, in a sense, the ECB perhaps bring out some stimulus as well today. And we've got concessions then when it comes to the China-US trade talks. One saying we won't put in the extra tariffs, and the other saying, okay, cool, we won't bring the other tariffs in for at least 2 weeks. Does this bode well for global markets? Is there a little bit more optimism? Is that why our local exchange also then sits in just green for today by the looks of it?
Yeah, and the rand as well, looking much stronger. It is true. It is the China-US trade talks that are driving things at the moment. Look, I think you have to judge it not from economic terms, not from the terms of the Chinese or whatever. You judge it from one particular vantage point, and that's what I've been judging it for the last couple of years. It's basically what's best for Donald Trump's political career. So Donald Trump has been pushing this. It wasn't the Chinese. The Chinese do not want this trade issue.
Yeah.
We've seen, for instance, Huawei, the issues around Huawei, the issues around, for instance, what's been happening with regards to, tariffs and so on, all been driven by the US. The Chinese have responded, but they are responding basically in to counter what the US is doing, not basically initiating anything on their own. And why is Trump doing it now? The reason he's doing it now is we are seeing some signs that the US economy is under pressure. And he's going into an election next year. If you had the US economy doing reasonably well, he'd be more than happy to have this Chinese, talking point going with him into the election, because, bashing China, especially among Trump's electorate, is very positive. Yeah. So it's very easy for him to say, look, bash China, these are the cheaters, they steal our stuff, they don't compete fairly against our strong American workers, blah, blah, blah. And he would love to do that. Unfortunately, he doesn't want to do that if there's also a recession happening, which there is a significant chance. I've seen indicators out there that says there's maybe a 30, 40, maybe a 50% chance of a recession in the next 2 years.
Sure.
If it happens before the election next year, Trump is likely out. Even now he has a very difficult, road to run, but with a recession he's out. And I think this is one thing that might be basically pushing us towards, more reconciliation with the Chinese.
Sure. I think that'll certainly set the course for his presidency, for the remainder of it anyway. Okay. The ECB, how much stimulus do you think comes out of that today as well?
what can they do?
It's a tough one, right? It's just a difficult market overall.
Yeah, look, I mean, the Europeans have really been in the doldrums. I mean, we've seen some signs of like recovery coming through, but with Brexit, with the stuff they're seeing happening in places like Italy, for instance, they need to have a stronger economy, a stronger growing European Union solves a lot of problems, not just basically in terms of the economy, but politically as well for Europe. I mean, they've seen things like like I said, the Italians having real pressure with the austerity being forced on them by the ECB and so on. Now, what can they actually do? What have they not done this far that they can actually really push the economy forward? I'm not so sure they can do very meaningful things. They may be doing something that might help the market. They might be pushing a bit more stimulus into it. But really right now, I don't see any indications that the stimulus they pushed already into the market has really been positive for the economic growth of the European Union, despite the fact that they are much more lenient at the moment than, for instance, the US Fed.
Yeah.
The US economy is growing much faster than the European economy at the moment.
Sure. Let's quickly bring it locally. We're going to run out of time eventually. Just generally, the aspects here are that Aspen is doing much better than most because a set of earnings having come out as well yesterday, late after trade close. The Durban-based company, of course, doing fairly well. And it's a good recovery then, considering how bad things were after the NHI bill had been officially passed. And look at that, the top two are the medical space.
So hopefully we might see something pushing back on the NHI. But I think Aspen has been really, pushed down dramatically. I mean, even at this current price, it's, significantly down from where it was. It's a fraction of what it once was. It's down even for this year as well, even despite this 9% recovery. Look, I mean, this company has really been pushed down. It was once a darling, once priced for perfection. Now it was almost being priced for failure. And I think the market's basically readjusting to a certain extent. And that's why we're seeing this recovery coming through, especially since we have more concrete numbers around things. They've cutting back in debt. They have said no to that dividend. And I think that is something I think that's quite good. And I do think longer term, we do see a lot of positivity around Aspen because it's in the right kind of area. It's in Medicare, it is in pharmaceuticals. And without serious government intervention like the NHI, those sectors should be doing really positive going forward.
Okay, well, here's a big one. Mining production going up 2.4%. It's a massive increase and probably the first in quite some time there, at least then. The mining stocks have also been in precarious situations, but you saw some sort of turn themselves around. Can the mining sector pull itself out and at least trickle along, if not at least stay steady?
Look, I think it's nothing to do with the mining sector. The mining sector basically is a taker, not a giver of results here. They take whatever the conditions are. They take the conditions of the ground, they take the conditions of the politics, they take the conditions of the price of their product. So with regards to that, the product prices have come a bit better, especially with the currency being weaker. So in rand terms, a lot of these commodity prices are looking great. I mean, we saw your all-time highs for some of these things.
Yeah.
Okay. At the same time, we are seeing, some recovery coming through with, possibly, like I said, with these trade deal, calming down between the Chinese and the Americans. And the Chinese, to combat, the slowdown that they're experiencing because of the Americans, looking for more stimulus locally, and that's also positive for commodities. That's helping them out as well. Politically, it hasn't really gone in their favor in South Africa. But like I said, it's not about what they are doing. They haven't really changed their approaches. They seem to be slightly more or less, optimistic about expansion and contraction. But in terms of like what's going to really push them forward, it's nothing that they can do. It has to be, the politics has to be sorted out, the commodity price has to go up, and they control neither.
Very difficult for them. We'll certainly see how things fare. Of course, the gold price above that 1,500 mark for now. It is a key level. Platinum also 956 odd as well for an ounce there. A better picture as well for the South African currency at 1464, certainly up around 0.25% today. So certainly a much better picture when it comes to that as well. Then, of course, all the rage will certainly be around the ECB and that announcement, which is set to come out a little bit later today. What do they do with interest rates? A stimulus package perhaps in place. The China-US trade talks, a whole lot is set to come through from now right through until October, of course, when we see even minister-level talks take place there. We will catch up with all of that information and we'll get you all of it right here on point. But for now, that is where the buck stops. It's back to my colleague Nzinga right after this.